We all know that the Reserve Bank of India is having its regulatory sandbox of its own. Similarly, SEBI, IRDAI, IFSCA, all the regulatory bodies are having their own regulatory sandbox which helps a fintech company to test their product and service, that too in a controlled environment. But what if tomorrow a startup wants to launch a product or service that touches multiple aspects like banking, like insurance, like capital market and pension? So where they will go actually? To SEBI, to RBI, to IRDAI, to PFRDA? अभी इस सिचुएशन में क्या होगा when a particular product or service is touching multiple aspects like insurance, like banking, like financial markets? So कहाँ पे उस entity को जाना होगा? In which regulatory sandbox this particular entity has to go? So there is no particular regulatory sandbox for that, but there is a broad regulatory sandbox which is called as Inter-operable Regulatory Sandbox here, right? The whole idea of creating a regulatory sandbox is, let's suppose I have a product in my mind, I have a service to offer in my mind, I am a fintech company. Now I want to launch this product, I want to launch this service. The whole idea is, first let's make some testing, let's get some results, and then we will be launching this product or service, right? So I'm not sure as of now that how this product will go, how this service will go. So I will go for the testing phase. But the problem in India is there are so many laws and regulations that I need to comply with before testing this product, before testing this service. It becomes a big mess for any fintech company to first comply with all the rules and regulations and then test the product. कितनी बार क्या होता है, इतने सारे rules and regulations हो जाते हैं कि fintech company अपना product ही test नहीं कर पाती है, right? So that is why the whole idea of execution of the product or the service shifts from the product actually to the regulatory compliance, and that becomes a huge difficulty. That's why these regulatory bodies are having regulatory sandbox of their own. So in the regulatory sandbox, usually they allow the testing of new product and service, as we can see here. If you are having a new product in your mind, if you are having a new service in your mind that can impact the fintech, right? Now these regulatory sandbox will allow you to test your product in a controlled or regulatory environment. Now what do you mean by controlled environment or regulatory environment? Instead of giving too much attention on following the laws and regulation, as of now these regulatory bodies will help you test your product, will allow you test your product, that too in a controlled environment. That means you don't have to follow all the rules and regulations before testing. You can just test it with minimal laws and regulations, and then later on, once your proof of work is established, once your proof of concept is established, yes, आपके product में वो बात है, आपकी service में वो बात है, then what you can do is you can start following all the rules and regulations and you can go live, right? That is the concept of regulatory sandbox. पहले ही laws and regulations से आप एक company को kill कर दो, आप एक product को kill कर दो, service को kill कर दो, rather than let them test first. If the product is having some useful meaning, right? If the product के अंदर अगर कोई बात है, if there is something to deliver in the product, if there is something to deliver in the service which can change the future of fintech, right? Then that product can go live and they can actually follow all the rules and regulation. But first, let's them test. Let's understand their viability or not, right? Whether they are viable or not, whether they are useful or not. So the whole idea of regulatory sandbox is this. But what happens is sometimes, let's suppose the fintech company has launched a new product or service. Now the services of this fintech company is falling in the scope of RBI, or it is falling in the scope of SEBI, or it is overlapping with PFRDA, or maybe it's overlapping with IFSCA, or maybe it's overlapping with IRDAI. We have so many regulators in India, right? So what the problem is here, there are more than one regulator. So do I need to take registration in the regulatory sandbox of RBI as well as the regulatory sandbox of SEBI, IRDAI and rest of the regulators? No, because we have one single regulatory sandbox in India which is interoperable. Now as the name says it all, you can interoperate between different regulatory bodies, right? So if your product falls between banking and financial services or financial markets, what you can do is you can take it forward in the interoperable regulatory sandbox rather than separately RBI and SEBI. You can go ahead with the interoperable regulatory sandbox, right? So this is the whole idea of this regulatory sandbox. आपको अपना product test करना है. You are welcomed here. in the Inter-operable Regulatory Sandbox, देखो अगर आपका प्रोडक्ट बैंकिंग रिलेटेड है, अगर आपका प्रोडक्ट एनबीएफसी रिलेटेड है, तो आप तो डायरेक्टली फिर आरबीआई के रेगुलेटरी सैंडबॉक्स में जा सकते हो. यू कैन डायरेक्टली गो टू द आरबीआई रेगुलेटरी सैंडबॉक्स. अगर आपका प्रोडक्ट फाइनेंशियल मार्केट स्पेसिफिकली कैपिटल मार्केट रेगुलेटेड है, यू कैन गो टू सेबी रेगुलेटरी सैंडबॉक्स. अगर आपका इंश्योरेंस रिलेटेड है, so you can directly go to IRDAI regulatory sandbox. But if your product or service is in a mix, right, the areas are overlapping, it is a part of insurance, some of the features are related to insurance, some of the features are related to capital market, or some of the features are related to banking, then you need to go for the Inter-operable Regulatory Sandbox framework, right, in which all the regulatory bodies can definitely participate, and have a look. आरबीआई का अपना सैंडबॉक्स है, सेबी का अपना सैंडबॉक्स है, आईआरडीआई आईएफएससी का अपना सैंडबॉक्स है. सिर्फ एक ही एंटिटी है. देयर इज ओनली वन रेगुलेटरी बॉडी एज ऑफ नाउ विच इज नॉट हैविंग इट्स ओन रेगुलेटरी सैंडबॉक्स, एंड दैट इज पीएफआरडीए, पेंशन फंड रेगुलेटरी एंड डेवलपमेंट अथॉरिटी ऑफ इंडिया. सो प्लीज डू रिमेंबर दिस कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ इंटर-ऑपरेबल रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क, राइट, एंड the fact that PFRDA is the only organization which is not having the regulatory sandbox of its own. सही है, PFRDA का अपना कोई अभी रेगुलेटरी सैंडबॉक्स नहीं है. Now the whole idea of inter-operable inter-regulatory framework, right, inter-operable regulatory framework was constituted under the Financial Stability and Development Council subcommittee, a subcommittee of Financial Stability and Development Council. You need to remember this. If your product and service is hybrid in nature, what do you mean by hybrid in nature? The services or the product features are falling in different regulatory ambits of more than one financial regulator of India. If your features are falling in more than one financial regulatory body like RBI and SEBI both, then you need to go for Inter-operable Regulatory Sandbox instead of individually taking registration in the regulatory sandbox of every regulatory body. You can go ahead with the Inter-operable Regulatory Sandbox framework, right? So you can definitely test your hybrid financial products or services here if your product is falling under different regulators, right? That's how this is different from the individual regulator. अगर मैं बैंकिंग में आ रहा हूँ तो मैं आरबीआई के पास चल जाऊंगा. अगर मैं बैंकिंग, सेबी, आईआरडीआई सब में आ रहा हूँ या किसी दो में आ रहा हूँ तो आई कैन गो अहेड विद द इंटर-ऑपरेबल रेगुलेटरी सैंडबॉक्स फ्रेमवर्क. दिस इज द होल आइडिया, राइट? So as of now, which are the regulatory bodies they can collaborate on this particular matter? So RBI, SEBI, IRDAI, PFRDA and IFSCA, they can collaborate. They can collaborate on the particular matter which is concerning with different regulatory bodies. So this is, I can say, all the regulatory bodies. These are the regulatory bodies that can participate in the process of inter-operable framework. Now you might be surprised कि sir PFRDA is not at all having its regulatory sandbox of its own. Still, how can it participate in the inter-operable framework? So what's the harm in that, right? Is there any harm in that? Because PFRDA is not having its own regulatory framework, regulatory sandbox framework, still PFRDA can add value if some feature of your product or service is related to pension sector, right? Then PFRDA can definitely add value in the inter-operable regulatory framework. Maybe PFRDA is considering creating its own regulatory framework later on. As of now, they can add value in the inter-operable regulatory sandbox framework. So PFRDA is also included, but please do remember PFRDA का अलग से कोई अपना regulatory sandbox framework नहीं है, right? And who can participate in the inter-operable regulatory framework? So financial institutions, fintech companies, regtech providers. What is regtech provider? So it is a combination of regulatory and tech, just like edtech, educational and technology, right? Startups हो गए, other innovators हो गए, offering products and services related to multiple financial sector. So my product and service is being governed by different regulators in India. That's why I need to take registration in the Inter-operable Regulatory Sandbox framework, right? And definitely this is going to be a golden opportunity for those companies who want to launch their product. There is a low risk environment. You get so much of data, you get so much of support in testing your product and service, whether your product is viable or not. You can easily figure out in the regulatory framework of this particular initiative, right? So definitely you are having a low risk. You do not have to do so many compliances and laws and regulation. You get a controlled environment for your product testing. That's the major benefit. Now there is a concept of PR, which is principal regulator and associate regulator, right? Principal regulator and associate regulator. So let me just quickly explain it to you. Say for example, if your product or service, say for example, is having 10 features. Your product or service is having 10 features here. Then most of the features are falling in the scope of Reserve Bank of India. Some of the features are falling in scope of SEBI. So RBI here will be the principal regulator. RBI here will be the boss. SEBI will be the associate. SEBI will be the associate. If we flip the example, let's suppose out of 10, 7 services are falling in the scope of SEBI. Then SEBI will be the principal regulator and RBI will be the associate regulator, right? Rest of the features are falling in banking domain or maybe non-banking domain. So if your product and services features are falling with a particular regulator, if the majority of the features are falling in a particular regulator, in the scope of particular regulator, let's suppose I have launched a product. Now most of the features of the product are related to capital market, then definitely my PR will be, my principal regulator will be Securities and Exchange Board of India, and my associate regulator, rest of the features are falling with IRDAI, for example, they are related to insurance, then my associate regulator will be the IRDAI, right? That's the concept here. अच्छा, इसकी कोई application fees होती है क्या? If you want to apply for the Inter-operable Regulatory Sandbox, no, there is no fees. However, the testing under this particular sandbox fee, if any of the PR concern may be applicable. अगर principal regulator की कोई fees है तो testing के लिए वो fees आपके लिए भी applicable हो जाएगी. Otherwise, there won't be any fees, right? There won't be any fees. अच्छा, there is some deadline for submitting the application under the Inter-operable Regulatory Framework. No, there is no such deadline. It is accepted on tap basis throughout the year. So आप पूरे year में कभी भी अप्लाई कर सकते हो. दिस इज ऑन टैप बेसिस. आप नॉक करोगे डोर को और आपके लिए इंटर ऑपरेबल रेगुलेटरी फ्रेमवर्क के दरवाजे खुल जाएंगे. दिस इज ऑन टैप बेसिस, राइट? दिस इज ऑन टैप बेसिस. दिस इज ऑन योर रिक्वायरमेंट बेसिस दैट यू कैन avail this facility. Now the question is, who is going to scrutinize your application? Who will be doing the actual scrutiny of your application? Let's suppose I have filed my application in the Inter-operable Regulatory Sandbox. Now who will be checking my application? That's the question number one. So the preliminary scrutiny will be done by the fintech department of Reserve Bank of India, and the detailed scrutiny will be done by your principal regulator, Say for example, if your product is falling, majority of your features are falling in the scope of SEBI, right? And rest of the features are falling in the scope of RBI. Then who will be doing your preliminary scrutiny? Obviously, irrespective of anything, the preliminary scrutiny will be done by the fintech department of Reserve Bank of India. Okay? And the detailed scrutiny will be done by SEBI here. Why? Because majority of the features are falling in the ambit, in the scope of SEBI here. I hope you are able to understand it, right? So आपका prelims का आपका phase 1 कौन लेगा? RBI लेगा. और आपका phase 2 मतलब detailed examination कौन लेने वाला है? Principal regulator यहाँ पे लेने वाला है. इस तरह से आप इस concept को समझ सकते हो. Are foreign fintech entities eligible to participate? Yes, they are also eligible to participate. Here, right? Now, because this is a foreign entity, then in that case, IFSCA shall act as the principal regulator. This is the case of a foreign entity, right? Seeking the regulatory process in India, seeking the testing process in India, facility in India. So definitely IFSCA is going to have a huge role here as a principal regulator, right? Now definitely the major role will be of PR, of the principal regulator. Why? Because your majority of the features are falling in the ambit of PR. So definitely PR will also going to evaluate your product or service based on its own framework. So let's suppose my PR is SEBI. So SEBI is going to evaluate my product or service as per the SEBI's regulatory sandbox framework, right? So it will be always done by a combination of PR and AR, but PR is going to have a major role here, And do remember, since PFRDA is not at all having its own regulatory sandbox framework, right? PFRDA के पास खुद का regulatory sandbox framework तो है ही नहीं. So that's why PFRDA can never become a PR as of now until and unless they have their own regulatory sandbox framework, right? Even if they act as a PR, they don't have any process established for the regulatory sandbox of their own. So that's why they cannot enter as a PR. They can always be associate regulator. They can never be principal regulator. Again, one of the important question. अच्छा, ड्यूरेशन क्या रहेगा? तो जो भी PR का ड्यूरेशन रहेगा, whatever the duration of the principal regulator framework sandbox framework is, will be the duration of this interoperable regulatory sandbox framework. Simple सी बात है, right? Now after doing the testing, what you can do is you can just approach the concerned AR and PR and you can obtain necessary authorization and regulatory approvals before launching your product, because as of now your product is in testing phase. So now you can launch your product because you got the approval, right? Now guys, two questions for you. Right here I have mentioned two questions for you. The first one is, as part of the new regulatory framework, Inter-operable Regulatory Sandbox framework, which department is entrusted with the preliminary scrutiny of the application? Question number 1. Question number 2, which authority will undertake the responsibility of the detailed scrutiny? Question number 2. So do let me know in the comment section later on. What do you think is the correct choice here? Let me know in the comment section about both the questions. And if you guys are preparing for RBI Grade B examination 2026, you can check this AIR 101 mentorship batch. You will be getting super mentor sessions directly with the one who has scored an AIR 1 in the RBI Grade B examination. You guys will be getting monthly 101 session with your mentors as well. This course is having live classes, notes, books, mock test and whatnot. Everything is included in this particular course. If you are giving phase 2 examination, this is the crash course for you guys. You can check out the course highlights as well. And if you are giving SEBI Grade A examination, this is the course for you, where I'll be teaching you commerce and accounts, finance, costing, company law, right? From the very scratch. So thank you so much guys. Bye bye. Take care. ये था हमारा इंटर-ऑपरेबल रेगुलेटरी सैंडबॉक्स का फ्रेमवर्क. इसको आपको अच्छे से पढ़ना चाहिए. रिसेंटली ऑन द RBI वेबसाइट देयर वर सम Q&As which they have released on the website, I think in the previous month. So do it very well. One question can come from this area as well in your examination. So thank you so much. Bye bye. Take care. See you soon in some other video.